So it was an average day during a not particularly inspired meeting, about a year and a half into production on a roughly cut but well-intentioned movie that I was working on at the most successful studio picture-for-picture in the history of film. Perhaps it's one of the few that you haven't seen, the sequel to Disney Pixar's Cars, the aptly titled Cars 2. Its semi-resolved, semi-functional state was not unfamiliar. Every film that enters production essentially enters a long process of incubation, of unrest, of endless critique and revision. The story and art teams labor for years to develop and elevate material, to smooth over rough patches, to find the jewels of ideas that make Pixar films not only functional, but brilliant. So to find the right balance of emotion and logic, visual acuity, dramatic depth, and most importantly, meaning, it takes a lot of exploration, but also a lot of average days sitting around a table thinking. So we were working on a sequence in which Mater, the hillbilly tow truck sidekick of heroic race car Lightning McQueen, is getting outfitted with an electronic disguise. It was a spy film, a story of mistaken identity. So in order to infiltrate a secret ring, Mater needed a paint job. In the movie, Mater and McQueen's relationship fractures, and the two of them need to bring it back together again. What happens is that Mater's shortcomings, his unapologetic, brash, and idiosyncratic enthusiasms, his perceived and actual failings catch up with him. And despite his best efforts, he finds himself in a position where his closest friends abandon him, and he's shamefully removed from his pit crew duties. It's a very dramatic film. So Mater's spy friends are trying to outfit him with this computerized disguise, but one of them, this astute sports car spy named Holly, she sees a problem. With all of Mater's dents, the pristine rendering of a new auto body won't quite map to his surface. So she presses some buttons, these mechanical arms come in, and they start to repair his imperfections. But Mater sees this and scooches aside and says to her, no, thank you. But these are valuable to me. I don't fix these. I want to remember these dents forever. The character posits that these little and not so little dings to our life narratives, our relationships, our experiences, our egos, come together to form our character. I think it's a beautiful and simple and powerful idea. It's a fitting visual and embodied metaphor in a film where all the actors are cars and motor vehicles comprise the landscape. It's an idea specific to a character whose successes and failures are marked on his skin. It's a thematic through line that can be explored across the entirety of the film with depth and resonance. This was the single best idea that I had in my 6-year tenure at Pixar. And this was the very worst film that Pixar ever made. Thank you, Paul, for inviting me to speak tonight at BayCHI. It's a pleasure and a privilege and a unique challenge to address all of you. I'm going to try and pull a thread between 3 distinctly different and I think compelling epics within the short span of my early career. Each has been valuable and difficult, a success and a failure, and each has left its own little dent. The first, you probably guessed, is my time in animation, specifically as a story artist at Pixar Animation Studios. The second, my role as storyteller at Airbnb, the popular accommodations marketplace. And third, directing and curating an independent contemporary art space in Oakland, California, out of my apartment. So each of these big moments forced me to basically take a walk around story, as if I was exploring a new part of a city, with familiar street walls, but with different cultures, similarities of purpose, but different concerns. So if one imagines venturing out into story as one would a city, one might picture the flimsy, flashy thoroughfares of a commercial midtown, the depth and insight of major institutions like universities and museums, the liveliness of innovation in art or technology or fashion, the tragedy of the undernourished and the underserved. If one imagines story as a city, one might picture walking through the peaceful open spaces of a central park, with long winding paths and thick trees offering respite and a view of the sky. Other times, when we look at story, we see the foot trails that have turned into roads over centuries, and the hard-won architecture of subways and utilities. Walking around story, seeing its varied interpretations, engaging with the idea of story through different functions, with different aims, one's understanding of what story is deepens, and with hope, one begins to gather a sense of priority, of what's important to you, to them, to you. When we commit to caring about the stories that we tell, we begin to develop a sense of ethics, a sense of purpose and meaning, a story sensibility that is specific to us. So this is all well and good. Obviously, it's all still very abstract in the way that I'm speaking about it. Admittedly, story is a messy thing and not easily understood. When you pick up a book on story, typically it's a few hundred pages long, and it's full of prescriptive ideas about what works and what doesn't. When you watch a TED Talk about story, speakers list a series of tips that, strung together, seem to offer some sort of guidance. But in my mind, they do little more than confirm that story is something of a mysterious, dark art. It is not. But, quite rightly, when you're faced with a blank page, with a field of completely open possibility, there isn't anything that you can do but take a breath and make your first mistakes. I remember seeing a lecture with a prominent director. I honestly can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Alexander Payne of About Schmidt and Sideways, or it was Julian Schnabel, maybe presenting The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. Anyway, when they were asked about the process and influences, the approach that one takes when beginning a project, the director said, "Every time I begin something new, I feel like I'm inventing film." And everyone in the audience laughed, I think because to them it sounded like he was being arrogant. But I think that actually what he was trying to say is that whenever you're faced with a new story to tell or a new problem to solve, no matter what your knowledge is or what your experience is, it's a terrifyingly open field of possibility. As a child, stories weren't really shared within my family. We didn't really have a tradition of that. I grew up in the suburbs and watched a lot of television, although I don't remember much of it. I wasn't a particularly prolific reader too. I'm just telling you how awful I am, basically. Although I did have a really great Grover book called The Monster at the end of this book. No? During playtime, I would organize parades or hit baseballs to invisible outfielders. Once, I remember setting up paper sketches around my room and walking my sister from exhibit to exhibit as if we were in a museum. But the stories that I found most compelling were in movie theaters. We didn't go to the movies very often, pretty much just at Christmas. It was always nighttime. We were with my cousins Chris and Cindy in Tilsonburg. And typically, we would see the newest Disney film, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King. And these set me on fire. They were unlike anything else in my life. They were complete sensory engagement. The way that things moved, like the heaving of the ocean waves at the beginning of The Little Mermaid, or the music that picked up and swelled and broke and carried you along through a provincial French town or a majestic American landscape. The clever lines, the colors, the shapes, the pacing, the yearning of the characters, their hopes and fears, strange encounters, discoveries, joys, guilt, sense of responsibility, swelling of purpose, sacrifice, and love. These captivated me like nothing else. So, as every kid does, I drew. When I was a preteen, I was still drawing. And then there was a turning point. One of the most significant films in my life came to theaters, just as I was entering into myself as a sensible human being. I was old enough, just old enough, to be filled with the passion, I was just old enough to have some sense of the adult world of dedication and possibility, and young enough to be filled with the passion of dedication and possibility. In 1993, Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park was released to theaters. I know, it's a big moment. And with it, my mind was blown. Also significantly, computer animation entered the big time. If animation had captured my imagination in the past, Jurassic Park took that feeling of awe to another level. It was all about That first shot on the lawn when Alan and Ellie are like in the Jeeps and then like they stand up, you know, and John Hammond is there saying like very simply, "Welcome to Jurassic Park." And then, you know, there's the music swells, da 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 da, and the brachiosaurs are like grazing the eucalyptus. I sure love dinosaurs. But what really struck me, I mean, right? They're good things. Yeah. But what really struck me was that an act of creation, the intentional deployment of artwork, of drawings, of people, thinking, choices, that those things could fill me with such pure wonder, could give me such unadulterated joy. That was amazing to me. And I found myself thinking, well, gosh, that's what I would like to do. I would like to make things that can capture other people in the moment and fill them with wonder at the possibility of life. So that was my starting point. I enrolled in drawing classes, by luck choosing an instructor who had worked in animation but had transitioned to classical painting, making 60-hour pencil drawings of plaster casts. I spent many summer days drawing angels on tracing paper for massive church altar paintings and crushing pigments into oils and egg yolks on glass plates, transferring fresh egg tempera paints into tubes. My friends and I pored over comic books and illustrations and the works of the classical masters. We worked on television show pilots and finished random projects in high school art classes. By the time I got to college, drawing was the thing. Drawing was the thing. But as I started learning character animation, hand-drawn traditional character animation, I found myself very concerned with these characters that I was drawing. Who were they? What were they doing? When the character simply needed to cross the screen in like a simple motion exercise, I would find myself burning with these questions. Who is this character? Why were they walking across the frame? How were they feeling? What did they want? Where were they coming from and where were they going to? And this type of inquiry extended into the graphic design of the character, the design of the rooms, the spaces that they were in, the motion itself and the feeling of the animation. So while at first drawing was the thing, suddenly character became the thing. At the time, one of my biggest influences was an animator named Glenn Keane. He was a lead animator at Disney and the fellow responsible for Ariel, Aladdin, The Beast, Pocahontas. And his drawings were possessed of a certain sensual appeal that I found captivating. In their proportions and their forms, their graphic shapes, the way they moved. But the thing that was really striking and exceptional about Glenn's drawings was their vitality. They had this life to them. Actually, more than that, or differently than that. They felt alive. But his drawings were also funny. They were these kind of clouds of lines, these raw, swooping, searching, really fat lines. He had these really fat pencils that he used. They were confident, but they were searching. And they were exceptional by any measure, but in their discursivity, they were different from any other drawings that I had seen. And I wondered, what was that difference? Well, Glenn had learned from some of the old Disney greats, and I think the secret to his process lay in the mentorship of an old animator named Eric Larson, who was one of Disney's 9 old men. I'll quote Glenn here. Eric had this ability to believe in the character and to communicate that constantly. He was always telling me, Glenn, you have to animate with sincerity. Okay, what is it? How do you animate with sincerity? What does that mean? You push harder on your pencil or what? What Glenn was doing was searching for a sincere drawing, pushing harder on his pencil to arrive at drawings that he believed in. The flurry of lines and the final on-screen performance of his characters were guided by that single central concern, to convey emotions with sincerity. That was it. That was the secret. Character animators were not drawers. They were not technicians. The purpose of drawing, the purpose of animation, the purpose of filmmaking was the transmission of emotion. And so, even before that, the task set before the artist, the designer, the maker, was the sincere embodiment of those emotions. As simple as it sounds, this concern with emotional connection remains a rarefied concern in storytelling and design. When we make things, when we develop concepts or ideas, when we work on the messaging, marketing, the rollout, and the deployment of our ideas, so much priority is given to logic, to common sense, to construction, to logistics, to strategy, to ROI, that for most people, a deep concern for human emotions isn't even on their radar. In tech, we talk about the user, and we have ideas about what they'll find convenient and delightful. But most of our time is spent tactically organizing information, and there doesn't tend to be much of a commitment made to making those fat searching lines, to finding those perfect gestures that capture and catalyze emotion. In tech, we don't tend to think about design with emotional salience as a goal. Until Pixar, in my early career in TV and commercials, stories were things that other people made. They were what content writers contributed. Stories were part of a pipeline and just another asset asked for at some point late in the game and susceptible to the whims of management and the limitations of budget and schedule. Stories were a part of a plug-and-play process. They were an afterthought. Unsurprisingly, the stories that we told were not very good. But what does this mean? What constitutes a good story? Or in other words, what drives engagement? I think a helpful insight can be found from an interview with the former Pixar head of story, Joe Ranft. This is from over 10 years ago, and when I read it as a student, it had a really profound effect on me. Joe says, try to draw something that connects with people. Draw things that connect with yourself and try to express that through your drawings so that other people get it. At Pixar, it has to do with character, whether it's an individual character that you're trying to find the expression of or the character of the environment. How does it feel? What does it evoke in others? Is it funny, sad, beautiful, irritating, claustrophobic, invigorating? Work on creating expressive drawings, drawings that feel like they're alive. So I want to highlight 3 elements in this statement. First, that we make things in order to connect with people. Second, that we start by making things connect with us. And lastly, that whatever element we're working on, be it the character or the environment, and I would expand this to include any element of a website or an app or an event or a social experience or an interaction, that we ask of that element, what is the individual character of that thing? What is it expressing? What does it do? How does it feel? And what does it evoke in others? I think that Joe's statement creates a link between the singular gestures of Glenn's searching drawings and the constellation of elements that make up a project. Everything in a project, every decision by every person in every department, I think, should be working in the service of one thing, connecting with people. A word for what I'm talking about is empathy. I think that it's our responsibility, our highest calling as creators, as authors, as designers, as storytellers, to encourage empathy. Obviously, it's easier when your job is making narrative films. They have such an incredible ability to transport us, to draw us into a situation, because that's what they do, that's what they're for. They're able to do this because narrative filmmaking really centers around one thing. Narrative storytelling is not about plot. It's not about story structure. Those are elements that support something greater. Narrative storytelling is about experience. A film is an experience that a person has. A film is a journey that an audience member gets to take. By allowing the audience to enter into the story through empathy, through a feeling of identification with the characters, they enter into a character's experience. And they're given the chance to live vicariously through other people's moral positions, through other people's difficult choices. There's a certain thrill to this, and this speaks to cinema's incredible capacity to communicate outside of cultures, times, worldviews, and technologies. If a filmmaker does their job right, there's something deeply moving at play, and we're propelled along. Audiences are given the chance to enjoy a play that is about them. And all of the elements of filmmaking, the motion, the sound, the music, the editing, the script, the cinematography, the acting, the sum of all of those parts, those are all there, artfully deployed with the singular purpose of putting you in the center of your own drama. The design is made to bring you there. I think it's notable that in this age of big data and of insights, that Pixar is a company that doesn't do any external testing. There are no consumer insights, there's no market research. There are a couple screenings, like literally 2 or 3 that happened at the very end of production, just, to make sure that everything was on the right track. But by and large, Pixar, which is, a multi-billion-dollar company that's been around for over 25 years, they have hundreds of employees, they're the most successful film company of all time, and they're guided simply by the faith that if we make things that connect with us, then they'll connect with other people too. It's kind of crazy. A good example of this in action was the production of Up. So at Pixar, there's this really beautiful theater in the center of the atrium, much like this fine auditorium. And over the course of production, we would hold screenings of the film in progress. It's very professional. You watch it so that you can critique it, you analyze it, you tear it apart, you come up with new ideas, and you do this for years and years and years, iterating and prototyping over and over again until you get it right. Well, during the production of Up, we would have these screenings at lunch, and people, the crew members working on the film, they would come out of the theater just weeping, just grown men and women just broken. And then the people eating their lunch are there with their chicken paillards and their salads, just going like, yep, I guess it works, yeah. And so, these reactions were coming from people who were working on the film. I mean, they knew what was going to happen. They made it, but what their reactions proved was that what we had done, what we had put together, had gone beyond our good taste. It had gone beyond our egos. It had gone beyond our common sense. We had gone beyond reasonable deductions. And of course, we had constructed the thing, we had engineered it. But sort of our inability to contain ourselves, the fact that it reached this deep guttural place within us was what confirmed that our engineering, our construction, was pointed toward the right goals. When you think about the results of this kind of gamble, it is crazy. Pixar films transcend geography, age demographic, class difference. These are films that capture us for an hour and a half, and then afterwards, all you want to do is talk about them or see them again or buy them on DVD or as gifts, for friends. It's crazy. In terms of engagement, in terms of connecting with people, that's pretty exemplary. So, what are the lessons for tech? Well, a website and mobile phone are different mediums and aspire to different kinds of engagement. That's true. But in the end, I don't think that they're so entirely different in terms of their concerns. I think that this current moment of technological change, of disruption, isn't really couched in our screens, but rather in the way that they affect us in our daily lives, in our lived experiences. I think that the real effect of technology lies in the experience of the people that engage with it and the journey that they're taken on. If that's a car ride across town, that's one thing. If it's staying in someone's home in Bahia, that's another. And if it's true that the current technological revolution is going to change the way that we live and meet each other, experience the world around us, and the access that we have to other ways of living, then I think it's vitally important for us to consider how we go about thinking about the user and what exactly our goals are in terms of engagement. But before I jump to Airbnb and the tech world, I want to skip ahead for a sec to an extracurricular project of mine. It's an independent contemporary art space called NA. NA is a gallery that I run out of my apartment, which is a storefront space in North Oakland. Over the last year and a half of operations, we've provided fully paid exhibition, events, and programming opportunities for over 150 emerging artists, sculptors, painters, musicians, poets, you name it. We've done it. Often, I'm asked how I choose the artists I decide to show, and I always struggle to describe the process because it doesn't follow any particular path. There's no set criteria for what good art is, or what it looks like, or where it comes from, or what you're supposed to do with it. When you meet an artist, often what you do is you schedule a studio visit to go and see their work. When you enter someone's studio, you're entering a very private space. This is a space where a person who's very likely incredibly different from you has spent a lot of time investing in material gestures, in aesthetic and social theories, following stray paths and unsettling passions. They've probably spent a lot of time alone or in their heads. And from that time, they've chosen a set of actions to create some mysterious objects that they're deciding to put in the world, and the world is going to react to them in some unknown way. Typically, these gestures can be as mysterious to their creators as they are to me. So maybe they're still sitting there unresolved. So what do? You visit an artist, they show you your work, they show you their work, and now how do you have a conversation with them? I am not an expert in sculpture or painting or dance. I am not an academic. I'm informed. I have my interests, my knowledge, my experience, my education. But in these situations, faced with what can only be mystifying, what do? I think the best thing that I can do is ask the question, what does this mean to you? What about this do you find compelling? How is this important to you as an individual? And what is it that you're trying to figure out here? There's a premium that I obviously place on personal investment, and maybe if we think about this in terms of art objects or art gestures or things that are made with a depth of intention, then what I'm putting a premium on is the outward manifestation of a point of inquiry and sort of looking inward or looking outward. The artists that I choose for the gallery are deeply invested in grappling with themselves and the world that they live in. And they take action as creators to mediate that relationship between human experience and the physical world. Anyway, I think that there's something of value in starting from a point of, I got auto-corrected here, of starting from a point of inquiry. And something that we can look at as a model as designers. So, at Airbnb, I hold the title of storyteller. I joined the company as a member of the Insights team, using narrative storytelling as a design tool to help think through projects by providing frameworks of understanding. So if I haven't already made it clear, I tend to think about story as an interrogative process. It's an iterative process that asks us to name our intentions, to question our assumptions, to search and explore, to define parameters and limits, to orient our design elements toward satisfying particular ends. At Airbnb, at our best, we use storytelling to work through the superstructures of our projects and to align all of the individual elements. To me, that's the interrogative part of the process, the insights part, to uncover the opportunities and the challenges of any given situation and figure out how to make the best of them. The other beautiful thing that storytelling gives us is a means to communicate those insights. A great example of what I'm describing are the Snow White storyboards. Yeah, cool. Okay. I'm just gonna click through these. Maybe I'll just click through them. Oh, there you go. Snow White is one of the major projects I've worked on at Airbnb. And I think it suggests one possible way that storytelling might be used within a technology company. Snow White was the brainchild of Airbnb's CEO, Brian Chesky, and it was authored with our former head of insights, Rebecca Sinclair. Brian had just finished reading the Walt Disney biography and was really taken by his use of storyboards. Before Snow White, animated shorts were all around 6 or 7 minutes long, but Snow White changed everything. It was on a completely different scale. It was 83 or 89 minutes, something like that. It involved the cooperation of hundreds of employees in dozens of departments. And what kept everyone aligned were storyboards. So that whether you were a background painter or a screenwriter or an animator, you came to one central resource. At the time, Airbnb was entering a period of hypergrowth, and the question was asked, how do we get everyone on the same page? And even more than that, what is the effect of this thing that we're making? Who does it affect, and to what end? The result of that point of inquiry are the Snow White storyboards, sketches that bring the entire company into alignment. We outline sort of our two main user journeys, our hosts, and then we also show our guest journey. Every new employee that joins the company, and now I think there are over 1,500 worldwide, is walked through these storyboards as part of their onboarding. These are not a product flow. They don't track the technology. Instead, they highlight the use of the technology within the greater context of their user's life, with the emotional journey of the characters as the focus. They acknowledge the fact that technology, when it's out in the world, does not exist in a neutral space. A mobile experience is more than a series of screens, a hand holding a phone in a white void. A mobile experience is when you're commuting home from work and you're in a packed train and you're exhausted and you get a notification. It's looking at your phone first thing in the morning when you wake up. It's setting something up as you're sitting in a cab. It's reading in the shower. Right? Do we all do that? I only read the New York Times, though, so don't email me. Don't text. Never text in shower. Important lesson. If you remember anything, don't text in shower. You might slip. These are the user-centered journeys that map emotional highs and lows. The Snow White frames are an idealistic view of the Airbnb experience, but they're simultaneously a cautionary tale. And what they do is act as a constant reminder for everyone at work of who we're serving and how we're serving them, and the various emotions at the heart of the services that we provide. These are the emotions that we design around. The boards are meant to be a jumping off point, not prescriptive, but an open tool. And each employee is encouraged to take each frame as a point of inquiry, a prompt or a provocation, so that they can ask themselves about the purpose of their work, the direction of the work. They can ask themselves, as they look at the work in front of them, what would I do in this moment? How would I feel? What would I need? What do I need to do to alleviate this point of friction or to elevate this moment of joy? What insight do I have into the human experience and into my own experience that's going to be affected by the thing that I'm making? In the end, the word is out on the effectivity of this tool, but I'll end by saying that it feels like there can only be incredibly great benefit in thinking about how we connect with people empathetically as we create technology that more deeply affects the way that we move through the world. For as we make tools that give us access to each other and the places that we live, we're doing nothing short than developing the dramas at the center of our own lives. So, thanks.
Paul, there's a switch on the bottom. Well, we'll try that. Oh, so, well, somebody else is queuing up a question. Can you talk a little bit about like how it was to work with Rebecca Sinclair? If she was like giving you presumably data or stories that had been collected, and like, was that a collaborative process or was it sequential?
It was a highly collaborative process. Rebecca, for those of you who don't know her, worked at IDEO, and I feel like when she moved to Airbnb, she brought a lot of Post-it notes with her. A lot of Post-it notes and a lot of questions. I mean, the way that I saw it, you know, everyone in our insights department essentially had a superpower. And Rebecca's power was asking really incisive questions, sort of endlessly. So when I started working on the Snow White project, a lot of work had been done up front to like determine the framework that we were going to draw from. But I think that the process ended up becoming incredibly collaborative because of the difference, sort of as I mentioned, between this like white void thinking and this other kind of thinking, that this narrative sort of empathetic thinking that's like grounded in the moment. So maybe a good example is this frame. One of the moments that we identified while working on the user journeys was that at some point during their stay, the user stays in the listing. You know, it's like pretty obvious, but it's hard to know like what to do with that. And so, so we had identified these moments, and that was a lot of the work that Rebecca and the team did. And then the process of storyboarding helps like take those moments and sort of develop them. Yeah.
A similar kind of vein, I was curious to know maybe examples of where this information, where these stories were coming from. Were you interviewing users after the fact? Were you sort of becoming users yourselves and just sort of throwing yourselves into these experiences, like, or was it just sort of all front end, like in our heads, kind of designing like a Pixar story?
It was kind of both. So the characters that we used were actually based on personas. Thank you. They were based on persona types. So yeah, a lot of research had been done into like who the characters were and like what they were generally like. But again, I think that there are limits to the kinds of like information that we're able to like get from that kind of study. So it was a combination of both. The way that I tend to think of it, big data is like taking all of these numbers and sort of discerning patterns. Insights is taking like a smaller group of numbers and sort of discerning patterns, and you know. And then the story process is sort of at the bottom of the funnel, and so as you're describing, it's really like couched in the storyteller as an author who's like thinking, well, if this was me, what would happen? So it's sort of the combination of all of those things. The research leading a journey, but then you know, a kind of like storytelling authorship to like take it somewhere and to ground it. Yeah.
Hey Nick.
Hey.
I love the connection between a designer or a creator owning both what's real or what resonates with the person I'm both telling a story for and telling a story about. And I'm curious, do you find other kind of members of the Airbnb team that maybe aren't designers, like legal, engineering, are also using the boards to connect with those journeys? And how does that work with the personal connection of like agency over a story? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. It's tough. I don't know. I actually don't know. I don't know how it works. Because I think everyone has a really different relationship to this as a tool, if that makes sense. Because story has these two sides, like one of them is like this sort of interrogative process, and then the other is this mode of communication. I think some people like take it in a very like surface level kind of way, but I I guess the most that I can say is that we try to, like the art department, which I belong to now, we try to make it available as we can to people, and we really try to clarify that like individuals should be able to take authorship over those moments. So it has more to do with like a global like design thinking process than that we're hoping to like infuse within the company. But yeah, I'm not totally sure how it plays out for individuals, or rather, it's like really idiosyncratic. Yeah.
Can I go? Okay. This is fascinating. So I have two questions. The first is, what you showed us here, are these all is this it? Is this the story?
That's it. What do you
83
mean?
minutes.
Well, is this not enough?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
So these are actually the. What? Are you okay? Okay. So this is one set of two boards. This is the guest journey. I'm just making a mess here. Oh well. This is the guest journey. There's a separate journey that's a host journey, and basically like our two main like predominant persona types, user types were mapped. We like map other things as well. Not just like external user types, but we also like use the process to like think about what the candidate journey is as an applicant to the company, or the employee journey is like as you know, Airbnb tries to figure out you know, how to make its employees happy. So yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question? Kind of.
Kind of. So my second question
Okay.
is, I would love to do something like this at my company, but we're much smaller and we don't have not yet, an ex-Pixar storyteller on staff.
You'll get one. There's one out there for every startup. You just have to clap your hands.
Yeah. So do you have any wisdom for how we can do this?
Yeah, I think. So again, I think you know, I'm a pretty big fan of drawing, but I also think that the drawings can be distracting because then it seems like the drawing is the thing, but it's not actually. It's this idea of like asking yourself, well, what do I really think about this? I'll give you like one weird example. I really like it, but I don't know if anybody else gets it. When, you know, when you're at home and then you like get your junk mail, there's always like an envelope from Chase Bank. I hope nobody here works for Chase. It's always like from Chase, and it's kind of shiny, and it like opens up this way, and like there's another envelope inside that makes it look like plane tickets, and it like looks like it's written by like handwritten. And I see all of these design choices. I can see the meeting where people were like, oh, this is delightful. Oh, this will delight them. And I'm just like, garbage. I don't need your credit card. And I think it's the difference between a kind of thinking that's outside of you and a kind of thinking that's inside of you. So I guess what I would recommend, the simple thing is, it sounds kind of silly, but just like before you start a meeting, or before you start maybe not every meeting, before you start a brainstorm on a particular subject, just ask yourself to tell the story of that subject. That's it. And I think that's where these things collide. So you have the big data, you have the insights, but then at some point I had to ask myself, well, what was it like for me to travel? What were the experiences that I had? You know? Yeah, I don't know if that's helpful, but I think just like, if everybody finds should we just do this now? Do we have a minute? Sure. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm just gonna move away from that podium. So let's take a minute. Let's take 4 minutes exactly. Everybody find a partner. Find a partner. Do you have a partner? Find a buddy. Is everybody good? Okay. Everybody has a partner. So now I would just like take a second. I hope this is useful to you. I would just take a second and just think about it for a sec, and then turn to your partner and tell them about a time in your life when you felt lost. That's it. Just like 1 or 2 minutes, just tell them about a time that you were lost, and then once you've told them, you switch, and then, you know. So let's just do that now for a sec. Physically lost, emotionally.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah. Does anyone here? Did anyone here hear like a really great story about a time that they were lost? Did anyone hear a really great one?
My story was just about my
You-
experience as a first-time mom. When I first brought the kid home from the hospital, my daughter, I was completely lost because I had no idea what to do to get her to sleep, and I was exhausted and I had no idea where to look for help because all the help websites online say different things, and there was just felt lost.
What do you remember? Do you remember the first thing you did when you got home?
From the hospital?
Yeah.
We set the baby up on the couch in her car seat.
Wow. Crazy. No, that's cool. I don't know.
And we have it on video, that's why I remember.
Really? And then what did you do? Did you just like sit and look at it?
For a couple of minutes, yeah, it was unreal because suddenly in our house there's a little baby.
I mean, you presumably you already had resources. You probably had books. You probably took classes. You probably have like parents.
I didn't take any classes because I figured I'd know what to do.
Okay, and so you have a baby on the couch, and you're just like, I've got a baby now, and
I'm totally exhausted.
And you're totally yeah. What did you? So what did you do?
I started just. I figured, okay, now she's here. I have to figure out some kind of a routine, and I just started doing what I did at the hospital, like change her diaper and then try to nurse her and then rock her, and then just kept doing that
That's so
for
nice.
the rest of my life.
What do you remember the? Okay, my last question. Do you remember the moment when you started looking elsewhere for information? Was it on I guess on the internet or on the phone or at the library or?
Yeah, pretty much right away I would start Googling every question I had.
Really? Like as a question arose,
Mm-hmm.
like the baby was crying, and you're just like, how do I baby
Yeah,
cry?
I mean, when you have a little baby, there's so much time when she's asleep or she takes forever to nurse, and during that time, all you can do is try to sleep or research all the ways that you can get her to sleep longer.
So, okay, thank you. So tonight, this one's for moms and babies. Even if your company doesn't have a Pixar artist, I think that it's possible anyway to think about a situation like being lost from any number, from 100, 1,000, countless different ways. And I think that if you start asking questions, you'll start to find like similarities between those moments. You'll start to like identify like moments of transition, emotional highs and lows. And I think that just asking those questions, just like having the sensitivity to like ask those questions. Well, how did you get there? Well, why did you do that? Well, what happened then? How did you feel? Like, I think that's the story process. That's the story process. And that's like the important and difficult work that you have to do.
So let's thank our speaker. Okay, thank you.